Hey guys, welcome back to another League video, and today we're going to be doing a tier list in terms of champion difficulty. So I know a lot of other YouTubers have already done this before. You might have seen this on, I think, Outside Jokey made one about a year ago, and even though this is a pretty overdone topic, I think it would be interesting for me to put my own spin on things because I feel like I have not necessarily a maverick opinion on a lot of champions, but I do think that, I feel like it would just be interesting to offer my own thoughts on it. So I've done rankings for, champion toxicity, I've done rankings for how broken they are or things like that, but I've never actually done one on how hard a champion is to play, which is not as straightforward as people might expect, considering one group of people might consider X champion to be really difficult to play, while another group might consider X champion to be very easy to play. So I think it would be interesting to kind of go through it. Before we get started though, I want to give a big shout out to Opera GX for sponsoring the video. They've been a long-time partner of mine and I'm glad to be working with them as always. For the 2.5 of you who don't know, Opera GX is a gaming browser designed to give you more freedom in optimizing and customizing your browser, letting you control how much of your computer's resources it's allowed to use, and also giving you way more features to tailor your experience to whatever you want it to be. In celebration of Worlds 2024, they actually partnered up with Riot Games to include exclusive digital content and features. The official Riot Corner comes with a co-streaming hub and access to limited time drops and bundles on lolesports.com that only Opera GX users can access, along with a Worlds calendar that gives you all the details of what's happening in that specific day. The Riot Corner also lets you install League of Legends mods from the GX store that come with custom sounds, themes, wallpaper, and music. Highly recommend checking out. They have a mod template for champions or just LoL esports. I know transitioning from one browser to another can be a daunting task in light of all the bookmarks, history, cookies, settings, and whatnot you'll lose, but Opera takes care of that with a quick import tool, letting you synchronize everything from other browsers, and it's also compatible with every Google Chrome extension, so it's all positives, no negatives. Definitely check out Opera GX using my link on screen, which is also in the description below. I've been using it for over 3 years now, never looked back. Thanks again as always to Opera for sponsoring, but for now let's get back to the video. And we have our 6 tiers here. We have hardest champions in the game. You basically have to one-trick them if you really want to get the hang of them. Difficult to play, requires continuous practice. You might be able to co-main or even have 3 champions overall, but typically speaking this champion will require about 60 to 70% of your games. Then you have low skill floor, high skill ceiling, which doesn't necessarily require a one-trick. They have some pretty staple bread and butter combos that you can kind of get the hang of, but if you really want to get the most out of them to go deeper into their kit, then you might need to put some practice in. But generally I would say they're very middle of the pack. Then you have relatively easy to play, requires little maintenance. There might be a few things you have to explore and get the hang of, maybe some interesting combos, say theory crafting, or you might have to watch a streamer to get some more ideas, but overall you can fit them comfortably into your champion pool. Finally, if you can't play these champions, then you just suck. These champions are meant to be pick up and play. Everyone should have them. If you don't know how to play them, at least on a basic level, then that's a skill issue. And then, of course, because it's obligatory, we have a Yuumi category, because Yuumi is going right down in there. Funnily enough, I actually don't think Yuumi is the easiest champion in the game to play because she does require you to look at the game in a very different way than most people would expect. Mechanically, Yuumi is super easy to play, but in terms of decision making and whatnot, I think she can be pretty divisive, but overall I still think that people who pick her, they pick her because they think she's easy and because they don't have to do anything. There's Earth the Manatee here, there's the Pearl King and stuff. We're going to be skipping them because they're not in League. And yeah, just get right into it, starting with our resident edgelord, Aatrox. Aatrox is the definition of low skill floor, high skill ceiling. He has an easy to understand combo and gameplay premise, but for you to really make the most out of him and to make it as easy as possible for you to land triple sweet spot Qs, then yeah, you definitely have to put a lot of effort into him. So he takes a bit more work to get going, but at the same time, he's a very digestible champion. Ahri is, I would say relatively easy to play, requires little maintenance. It's mostly skill shots. Positioning does matter, and knowing when you should actually dive in head first to land an easy charm, or if you should play more hit and run, dance around the fight. That can definitely skew Ahri a bit in terms of skillful play, but I think overall, she's one of the more straightforward champions. You land your E, your W, your Q, and that's about it. Akali is going to be, I'll say, difficult to play, requires continuous practice. She is quite challenging. Figuratively and literally, there's a lot of moving parts in her kit. And I think if you don't play her for a while, you might be pretty rusty on her, so she's one of the more mechanically demanding champions out there. Akshan is also kind of difficult to play. While he does have a pretty simple kit in the sense that it's 3-hit passive, you throw your Q to get more stacks and then your ultimate and stuff like that. He flies really close to the sun, because he's a marksman assassin who's generally quite squishy unless you go more of a bruiser, tabbies and shield bow build, which I don't think people even do anymore. Akshan, you have to play with a certain finesse to use him. You can't just play him like a traditional AD carry, nor can you play him like a traditional assassin. Alistar, I will say, he's pretty... I want to put him here, but I actually think Alistar is... No, I'll put him here. Yes, you can do some interesting combos with EQ or WQ rather, and then you can do like, you know, Q and then W first. But not much nuance to his kit. He's a very straightforward tank support, and yeah, you need to know how to play him on a basic level. It's just decision making at that point. Amumu is also down here. Every time you get autofill jungle, if you have no idea who to play, just play Amumu. He's super easy. He's designed to be jungle for babies, and that's about it. Nivea. I'll say Nivea is... This could be a hot take, no pun intended. Nivea is, I'll say, pretty easy. The hardest part of her is knowing where to be and how long you should stay there for, because again, you want to be close enough to the action to maintain Glacial Storm, but you don't want to be too close to where you're putting yourself in danger. I think mechanically speaking, some people might say, oh, you need to like know where to position your W and stuff, but from both a combination of macro and micro, I think Nivea is definitely an easier champion to play than people give credit for. Speaking of easy champion to play, we have Annie. Annie is super easy. It's just know when to time your abilities and line them up to get your stun. That's about it. She's basically a point and click champion, easy activation abilities, and you really cannot mess up when you're playing her. If you mess up, then you're just bad at the game. Aphelios is going to be up here. I don't think anyone will disagree. He has 5 weapons and multiple combinations of weapons, and you have to know how to permutate them too, because you have to switch the order. You have your primary weapon and your secondary weapon, which can affect a lot of different things. I think if you really want to master Aphelios, despite him having ultimately only 2 weapons at a time, knowing how to combine them and knowing when to use them and to how to plan ahead too. Like a big team fight is coming up in the future, then I need Severum and Crescentum. If we're playing for more of a siege poke build, then I go for Gravitum and Calibrum, stuff like that. So it's like, or no, team fight I believe you want Severum and Infernum instead, my bad. Basically a lot of different situations to account for, and I think Aphelios is deservedly one of the hardest champions in the game. I cannot wait for Ambessa to come out. Oh, I'm so excited. Anyways, Ashe. Ashe is free low. She is the brain dead 80 carry to play. You could say, oh, you need to know how to kite, but every 80 carry needs to know how to kite. And Ashe is actually one of the more generous champions in that regard, because she permasouls when she auto attacks. Asol. The new Asol is going to be... I'll say the old Asol would have been here, but new Asol, I'll put him here. He is pretty simple to understand. Once you get the hang of him, you should be pretty comfortable. There's a lot more you can explore with him from a macro perspective, but abilities wise, just put your black hole down and then throw out your giant meteor and then just vomit all over them. Aurora. Aurora is going to be... It's tough, because if you look at just her basic abilities, I'll put her here. If you look at her ultimate, then she's here. So I'll put her here, I think. Azir, definitely one of the hardest champions in the game, if not the hardest champion in the game. This tier list is not ordered, but I would put him at number 1. So much micromanagement you have to do. And unlike Orianna, who mostly cares about her ball, Azir has to care about his soldiers, multiple soldiers, and he has to care about his own position relative to them. So definitely the highest skill ceiling out of any champion in my opinion. Bard is, I'll say... here. He's mostly a macro-oriented champion. He does require a good amount of like micro-awareness in terms of where to put his magical journey, how to line up his cosmic binding, and when to use tempered fate and how to use tempered fate. Actually no, in that case I might actually put him here. Bard can be surprisingly tricky. He requires a different mentality to understand and play. Belveth is going to be, I'll say, here. She might be kind of complicated in terms of like how to move to make use of your dashes in a very constructive way, but W is very simple, E is very simple, and Ultimate is very simple too. So I think she's more of a, you know, she definitely gets stronger in higher elo, so that might have people believe she's a bit tougher to play, but I think overall she's not the worst champion in terms of difficulty. Blitzcrank, free low. He is the free low engage support right next to Alistar. Hook, then land your punch, or you can use Power Fist first to guarantee the hook, either way, but it's the same thing as Alistar where you can do QW or WQ, whichever you prefer. Brand is gonna be here. I think he's like Gari, more or less, where you just have to line up that one key ability to make it easier to land your other abilities, and that's about it. Even then, sometimes you don't really have to. You can miss your Hadouken or Seer or whatever you want to call it, and then just put your ultimate, stand right next to your opponent, and watch the entire world burn. I would say he requires a bit more finesse than Annie, a little bit more mechanical expertise and stuff, but he's still pretty easy. Then you have Braum. Braum is a low skill floor, high skill ceiling champion. He's straightforward. His Q and passive work well with each other. His W is a lease and shield essentially, but provides armor and magic resist. And then E is a direction facing projectile blocker. There are quite a few things in his kit that can fluctuate in terms of value, which is why I put him, I think, there. But I think I'm leaning more towards putting him here. Although, you know, compared to, let's say, other tank supports, Braum needs a bit more. Briar, I'll put her here. Really, the only challenge of playing Briar is knowing when not to go in, because Briar's entire kit is designed to go ape shit, and I think people don't know what restraint is when they play Briar, and they intend feed every game. She's not that difficult to play mechanically. Caitlyn's gonna be, I'll say here. She's a little bit more difficult than Ashe to play with, I think. Actually, maybe not so much. I will say she's a little bit harder to play than Ashe, just a bit harder, because you need to... The difference between a Caitlyn who can 2-tap you and a Caitlyn who does nothing is pretty substantial. So I'll put her here for now. I do think that she's a low maintenance character. Like once you learn her, you learn her. You can't really forget anything about her. Camille, I'll say Camille's gonna be here. She's a pretty simple attack style of just, you know, landing Qs and then using shield to trade, W to harass and slow, but all the different angles in which you can approach with hookshot does lend a bit more to complexity than she initially gives off. Cassiopeia, I'll actually put her here. She's pretty mechanically demanding. Her E is point and click yes, landing her Q, landing her W, landing her ultimate in a way that gave her the most amount of advantage relative to the enemy team getting shut down. Does make her quite challenging because you have to play her like an AD carry, but you also can't play her like an AD carry. It's kind of weird. Cho'Gath is free. Landed Q, you can easily land Q by slowing and silencing, and that's about it. Corki is going to be here. I say that because despite him having, you know, being an AD carry, having an easy escape tool and easy gap closer, there are a few times where you actually want to be super close to enemy teams to get as much as you can out of Gatling gun, and other times where you want to kind of dance around the fight. So I think more than Caitlyn and Ashe, you definitely have to know when to play risky on Corki. He's a very high risk, high reward ADC. Darius is, I'll say here, every top laner should know how to play Darius. Let's be real. He's like a staple. And, you know, you could say, oh, you need to know how to layer your combos, stuff like that. It's not that complex. Darius is super easy. Diana's gonna be, I'll say here, or here maybe. You can play her like a burst assassin, or you can play her more like a diver, fighter, skirmisher kind of champion. She can play, like, she can wear multiple different hats, but I think Diana has a pretty linear engage pattern. It's not that difficult to play her mechanically. It's mostly just knowing when to queue up her passive to get a front loaded burst, or when to just keep fighting. That's about it. Mundo, free. He's brainless. Who the hell is this one? Is that Elder Drake? I think it's Elder Drake. Draven's going to be, he definitely requires continuous practice. Knowing how to pilot his axis, knowing how to manipulate the position of where they're going to land. It's a unique mechanic to Draven that you definitely have to be continuously playing, because if you don't play him for a while, you might not be used to it anymore. Although I think Draven mains might disagree, because I've had a friend who used to one-trick Draven back in I think season 7 and 8, and he hasn't touched him in like 2 years, and then he came back to him and it's as if he never left. So maybe it becomes muscle memory after a certain point, but I think looking from an outside perspective, Draven's a more difficult AD carry to play because of that mechanic. Echo is a little bit more nuanced than Diana, I think. You can do a lot of kind of cool flashy outplays with him with his ultimate and W and stuff, so I think he's not quite as difficult as a Kali, but certainly a bit more challenging, and you can definitely tell the difference between a first time Echo and someone who's been playing Echo for a long time. Elise is going to be quite challenging to play. I say that because even though her burst combo is fairly straightforward, I think the way she plays right now is very similar to Nidalee. Not quite as difficult as Nidalee, but very similar to her, where you're on a real ticking time bomb, and sometimes it can be difficult to play an assassin who has to decide if she wants to use her repel to engage or escape, because she doesn't have an easy way out when she gets in. Transformation champions in general are just really difficult to play because you have to manage multiple abilities and a mutually exclusive melee and range form. So by default, I think all transformation champions are going to be here or higher. Evelynn is going to be, I think, continuous practice. Similar to Draven, she has a mechanic unique only to her. And if you don't play her for a while, you might forget what you can and can't get away with compared to other champions, and vice versa. Like, you have to play her in a certain kind of delicate way to make the most out of her, and I think if you don't continuously play her, then you can kind of forget that. Ezreal is probably here or here because he's skill shot the champion. I guess like you can say like very similar to Ahri, he's like a very skill shot heavy champion, but he doesn't have a way to easily guarantee landing all of his other stuff like charm. If Ahri lands a charm, Q and W are guaranteed, whereas for Ezreal, nothing is guaranteed. You can land all but one ability, you can miss every ability, you can land all abilities. So I think Ezreal, people play Ezreal because they think he's easy. He's actually quite hard. Fiddlesticks, I'll put him here. He's not that hard. He's a little bit more challenging than old Fiddlesticks. Old Fiddlesticks would have been here, but I'll put him here. Fiora is a, I'll say, low skill floor, high skill ceiling. She's straightforward, very much like Camille. She has a straightforward pattern, but then the different angles in which you want to approach combat with her can very easily elevate her difficulty ceiling. So I think she's a low skill floor, high skill ceiling champion. This, one of the easier assassins to play in my opinion. Galio, I'll say here as well. He's not as straightforward as your typical bruiser or tank, but he still kind of is. Gangplank. Gangplank requires continuous practice to play. He's a very difficult control mage to play. Yes, I call him a control mage. That was my shoulder, sorry. A physical damage control mage, and quite hard to play at that. Like barrel timings and positioning yourself relative to them, and like knowing when to go melee or when to poke. I have a grudging respect for Gangplank mains, even though I hate Gangplank. Garen, free. Nar is, he's quite tough. Actually, I might even put him here. He's a transformer. Like I say, he's a transformer, only it's involuntary, and the two different forms are quite unique to each other. But because you can't transform on, on demand, he can be a very taxing top laner to play mentally. Gragas is going to be here. He's more nuanced than other tanks, or not really a tank. He's an AP bruiser now, but I think he still is okay. You know what? No, low skill for high skill ceiling. You can do some pretty funky shit with the barrels and explosive cast. So I'll put him here. Graves is a, he's hard to play. I will say that. He is hard to play. It's hard to get rusty on Graves, if that makes sense. It's not like Draven where you can mess up on the axis or forget his mechanics. It's not like Gnar where you have to control something that's uncontrollable. Graves, I think like once you learn him, you know him forever and you don't really need to continue maintaining him, if that makes sense. I might be wrong, but again, this is my opinion. Gwen is very similar to the other horsewomen. She's pretty easy to understand, but then there's a huge difference between a good Gwen and a bad one. Her W, as BS as it may be, is a tricky ability to work around because of how conditional it is. So I think Gwen is, yeah, she's not a super easy champion to play, but I also don't think she's not up here, for example. Hecarim is probably here. You need to understand a bit more to him. There's a little more depth to him than the brainless champions down here, but I think overall he's very straightforward. Heimerdinger, probably one of the most difficult champions to play in the game. This is a hot take. I say this because Heimerdinger himself, like, I don't know what it is with this guy, but I actually respect good Heimerdinger players. He's an interesting champion. I tried playing him myself a few times. It's just hard because he's a constructor champion, very similar to Azir. And yet, unlike Azir where you can like move around and stuff, Heimerdinger, he kind of is like a stand your ground kind of dude, like a control zoner mage dude guy. And knowing what ultimate to use, like the opportunity cost behind using the grenade, the super turret, or his mega rocket barrage and stuff like that is, no, he's quite difficult. He's actually very difficult. Like, decision-making wise, you need big brain to play him. Hui he's a very simple mage in terms of like his combos are simple. You land his little blob that fears enemies, and then you land your explosive flame, whatever it's called. Like you can do all that stuff, or devastating fire. There you go. Those are very simple, but considering most people when they play League, they mash their abilities. Like, if you're doing a QWE combo, what you're actually doing is you're mashing the Q button, then you're mashing the W button, then you're mashing the E button. Whereas on Hui, you don't want to do that because if you double tap, you are casting an entirely different ability than the one you want to cast. So I think Hui, very similar to Gangplank and stuff, his unique mechanic makes it so you might need to like continue practicing him to get good at him. Illaoi is a tougher Juggernaut than she looks. She's no Darius, she's no Mundo. She may come up that way, it's like the whole, oh, land the spirit and the rest is history. Yes, but she actually requires quite a bit of setup to truly master and get the hang of, and knowing where to position yourself relative to where your tentacles are to get the most amount of tentacles and where to put them down. And even like landing skill shots with your Q, because you want to try to hit both the spirit and the opposing champion at the same time. So she can be pretty tough to play. Irelia, I'll put her here. No, I'll put her here. I think of the 4 horsewomen, she's the lowest maintenance because the only thing you really have to keep track of are how you can make use of the minions to extend their threat range. I know that kind of conflicts with Fiora and Camille having different angles in which they can attack from, which I suppose would put Irelia there, but in teamfights, she doesn't really have many minions. You just want to land as much of your E and ultimate on as many targets as possible and kind of just auto attack them to that. I'll just, maybe for the sake of fairness, I'll put her here. Ivern, he's so weird, but I'm going to put him here. Once you learn him, you learn him. He's an awkward champion to pick up, but once you pick him up, he's pretty brainless after that, I think. You play him like an enchanter. Janna is going to be probably here. More nuance required than your brainless tank engage supports, and I think a lot of enchanters, I'm going to call them that too. Enchanters are interesting. You have to fly really close to the sun. You have to put yourself in danger, to protect your team, while at the same time your abilities mechanically are not that hard to execute on, but there's a lot of decision making involved for enchanters, which is why I think they're they're a bit more taxing, or not taxing, but a bit more, I guess, you know, sophisticated to play than tank supports. Tank supports are more just like be the right place at the right time, find a person to pick out and kill them. I mean, Jana in particular, I think her Howling Gale alone makes her pretty nuanced in how you want to play her, because sometimes Howling Gale can be used as a field tool, sometimes it can be used as a lockdown tool. You never know. Jarvan's I won't say here, but I feel like putting him next to Garen is weird because Jarvan could do a bit more than Garen for sure in terms of like what you need to do to like execute on him. Darius is also here too, so I might just put Jarvan here. Jax is probably here, if not here. No, I'll put him here. I think he's realistically super easy to play. Am I saying that you become TF Blade when you play him? No, but like he really is just auto attack you. The only trade combo you have to really keep in mind is like get 2 auto attacks on minions and then either Q, W, or just walk up to your opponent and W. That's it. Jace is going to be up here. Jace is hard. Jace is quite difficult. I might actually put him here. Of all the Transformers, I think Jace is the most difficult to play depending on how you approach it, because there's a reason he's continuously 47% win rate, and yet at the same time he's one of the most popular top laners in Challenger. He doesn't have as straightforward of like a range to melee or melee to range combo. Like for example, Nidalee, you start with range, you throw your spear, then you go in with your melee form and, you know, go for the kill. Or at least you start with your range, go for the cocoon, stun them, and then you go melee for the kill. Jace, he doesn't really have that. Sometimes you want to open up with one and then go to the other. So it can be quite difficult to play him, I think. Jhin is... he's okay. He's over here. He's more difficult than other ADCs, but I wouldn't exactly say he's over here. Yes, he has unique 1, 2, 3, 4 mechanic and whatnot, but it doesn't make him difficult to play, it just makes him different to play. Jinx is gonna be, I'll say, here. She's like Caitlyn, where she needs a bit more than Ashe to work, and especially when you're trying to play her very mechanically, then I will say she's a very high risk, high reward ADC. She's hard to play, or not hard to play per se. She just, like, you gotta get very close and put yourself in a lot of danger, although at the same time you kind of don't have to, but I think she's gonna be here for now. Cassante is actually hard to play. For all the BS that he has, he is difficult to play. He's a very stable pro play champion and even high elo champion, but there's a reason no one plays him really much in low elo, because he's really hard to play. He's kind of a shapeshifter, but not really. His ultimate can be kind of tricky. His different like kind of displacement tools can be tricky too. So I think I'll give him that at least. He's very challenging to play. Kaisa is going to be maybe here. She was marketed as a super difficult to play, you know, AD carry, but when you really get the hang of her, I think she's very similar to Vayne, where it's just, no, I don't actually. I do consider Battle Marksman to be more challenging to play than traditional machine gun marksmen, so I think I'll just put her there. Speaking of challenging, we have Kalista, who is going to be here. I've actually heard some people argue Kalista's super easy to play, but I wholeheartedly disagree. I think she's one of the hardest, if not the hardest AD carry to play right alongside Aphelios. Karma's over here. Knowing when to mantra with her and what to mantra with her, like that's about it. She requires a bit more tact to play than, like, very similar to Java. Karthus is here. Contrary to popular belief, you actually need to know when not to die. I think, yeah, he's kind of tough. As a jungler, he's actually like over here because like you're dancing very close to the sun with this guy. But overall, I think Karthus is he's okay. Land your Qs. That's it. Cassidy will be here. Pretty easy champion to understand. Very decision making oriented. Like his mechanics are not too complex. Katarina's gonna be, I'll say, here. You know, pre-rework, like she's here, but Katarina here, a good Katarina actually is hard to come by. It requires a lot of quick thinking and fast responses, like knowing where you can go, your presence of mind, I guess, and like keeping track of your escape options, your engage options. Katarina's a tough champion to play. She's not as simple as she used to be, definitely not. Kayle she's here. She's difficult to play, more difficult to play than these champions for the sole fact that you actually have to think when you play her. That's about it. Blue Kayn is going to be, I'll say, here, and Red Kayn will be here. Blue Kayn is, I do think Blue Kayn requires more thought to play and like kind of like respecting your limits and whatnot, whereas Red Kayn's just standard kind of brain dead bruiser, just like go in, fight, do damage, sustain, stuff like that. Kennen's gonna be here. He can be a bit more tricky to play than like Annie, even though they both have like stun mechanic, and some people say, oh, just flash ult. Yes, that's one way to go about it, but at the same time, he is a squishy champion, so you can't treat him like a Malphite and kind of go guns blazing. Kha'Zix is gonna be here. Low skill floor, high skill ceiling. I think you know, definitely like knowing what evolution to pick first, getting the most value out of that, and kind of playing around isolated opponents, like waiting for your opponents to kind of spread out just a little bit to get the isolation damage. Most people think of Kha'Zix as more of like a W evolved stun bot, or not stun bot, but soul bot. I think I'll put him here for now. Kindred's kind of tough, definitely kind of tough. I'll say you need a very keen sense of macro and jungle awareness to play them, because again, you're gonna have to sometimes invade enemy jungler, and sometimes you also want to, you have to like learn how to fight with your Q, like knowing how to jump, where to position yourself and stuff like that. And then of course your ultimate, like how do I want to use my ultimate to protect me without at the same time rescuing my opponent, if that makes sense. So I think Kindred is a tougher jungler to master. Kled is also here. Kled, you have to, I almost want to put him here, but he's not. Like, you need to one-trick him to get good at him. The only good Kled players are Kled one-tricks. I don't think you have to one-trick him necessarily, but he does require, like, he's similar to Briar, only a little bit more mechanically difficult, I would say, because they're both kind of freaks and insane. Except that Briar is more point and click, do it for you, whereas Kled, you actually have to put in the work. Kog'Maw, probably here. His skill ceiling is mechanics, that's it. But if you have a Lulu or whatever, you don't really need mechanics. LeBlanc, she's a tough champion to master, but at the same time, once you do get the hang of her, she's pretty easy to kind of retain. Lee Sin's gonna be here. He's not quite here, I don't think. Not compared to how people used to think of him. I think Lee Sin's a tougher champion to play, and I don't think you could just kind of pick him up whenever. He needs a certain kind of muscle memory that if you don't exercise it, you will eventually get rusty on him. Leona's gonna be here, pretty brain dead tank. Lilia is gonna be, I think, here too. She plays very hit and run oriented. You can't just engage head on, but you also can't run away and kite as much as, if you were to play a different jungler. So I think she also is a very unique champion that you do need to kind of really get the hang of. She reminds me of Aurora, except a little bit more difficult. Lissandra is around here. I'll put her here. She's a relatively simple champion. Lucian's gonna be here. He's a battle marksman, just like Kai'Sa, so I think I'll give him the pass to go here. People used to think of him as the hardest ADC in the game prior to Kalista. I still think that, yeah, he does take a lot of effort and a lot of awareness, so I'll put him here for now. Lulu is here. Just like with other enchanters, I think she requires more brain than your tank engage supports, but still, it's still Lulu. Just drop your abilities on your ADC when they get engaged on and let them do the rest. But you also have to protect yourself at times. Lux, here, basic skill shot orientation, more complex than Annie, just a little bit. Malphite, free low, this guy is broken and brain dead, just spam Q all day, stat check your opponent, there you go. Malzahar, also free low, brain dead. Yes, okay, I know you want to like max out your Voidling stacks and then you want to put E on them, make sure you line up your abilities and stuff before you ult so you can get the most damage, but come on, it's Malzahar. Then we have Maokai. Maokai also super brain dead. He takes more skill compared to his previous iteration of Vengeful Maelstrom, whereas his new, whatever it's called, not Twisted Advance, what's his Bramble, whatever it's called, his new ultimate, that takes a bit of work, but he's a super easy tank to play, and he will stay that way. Master Yi, I'll say here. Like, mechanically, he's not that challenging. He's really not. Like, auto attack reset on meditate, that's it. And then know when to go in. He's not that difficult. I don't know why people consider him so difficult to play. Yes, he's risky to play. There's a difference between being risky to play and difficult to play, but he's like Karthus, where you can intend feed on him if you don't know what you're doing. But when you do, like, he's not that difficult to continue playing properly. Milio, I'll say Milio's gonna be here. I think Milio's a more difficult enchanter to play. He has a few more things that you have to kind of keep awareness over, like, who to position a campfire over, and how to line up your Q to knock back multiple targets if possible, or to get most amount of damage, and then a AoE cleanse and heal that, while it may seem simple, like, oh, just use it when someone gets stunned, sometimes you want to know when to use it for the most amount of benefit. It's not the same as, say, what's a good example? Like a Lulu Wild Growth, where you can only affect one person, so you just use the one person who is under the most amount of fire. For Milio, you might want to cleanse the AoE Seraphine ultimate more than, let's say, the Ash Arrow, for example. Misfortune, pretty simple. I think I'll put her here. The only variance with Misfortune is just alternating your Qs, or not Qs, but alternating your attacks to get her passive off as much as possible, but that's about it. Mordekaiser, brainless. He's so brainless. Oh my god, you can miss everything and still kill people. Morgana, I'll say here. A little bit more effort required. Obviously, if you land your Q, then she becomes here, but I think Morgana is a very decision-oriented champion, and like, again, knowing if you should focus your efforts on one person, or if you try to get as many people as possible, stuff like that. Nafiri is mechanically super simple to play, but decision making, she gets a bit more complex. So she was designed to be a very straightforward linear engaged champion, but you can't really stat check people like you can with bruisers and juggernauts, so she's a bit more work in that regard. Ah man, the hardest part about doing tier lists is that I try to do them all in one sitting, and because of that I have to talk for like an hour straight, and that actually strains my throat a lot. Nami is I want to put her here. I think she might be more difficult to play than Janna, Karma stuff, but not that much more difficult to put her up an entire tier. Then we have Nasus, brainless, press W, win, fuck his W, holy shit. Nautilus is also kind of here. He's kind of brainless. Nico, you know what, I'm gonna put Nico here. A good Nico, especially with her new transformation abilities, like her ability to masquerade as a minion or ward even and stuff like that. Like Nico can be quite tricky, I think. Takes a bit of deranged psychotic tendencies in order to play her, or psychopathic tendencies. Is that Nidalee? I think it's Nidalee. Nidalee's gonna be over here. There we go. She's more difficult to play than Elise, that's for sure. And just as difficult to play as Chase, because again, she's on a ticking time bomb, and I think she's regularly known to be one of the more mechanically challenging champions. I'll say Neela's gonna be over here, if not maybe over here, but I don't think she requires continuous practice to win. I think she's just an odd champion to play in a role that doesn't really suit her too much, but you have to play it there anyway. Nocturne's pretty free, yeah, more or less. Nunu is going to be, I think, here. Out of all the tanks we've talked about so far, he requires just a bit more, because I know some people will be like, oh, just snowball, walk up and bite them and then press ultimate. Yes, but I don't know. I feel like Nunu isn't as easy to pick up as people think. Olaf is free. Just land your Q and then know how to know when to go in, basically, and know how to kind of stagger your attacks to like maintain his ultimate. That's it. He's so easy. Orianna is hard to play. She's a puppeteer champion like Azir, and so therefore you need to very much pay attention to where you are relative to your ball, when to use your ball, and when to, who to attach it to, whether you should attach it to anyone for that matter, or just control it yourself, things like that. Ornn's a little bit more tougher to play. Yeah, I'll say he doesn't have any like, easy point and click abilities, or he can't just like walk up to you and like bash your face and like Mordekaiser can, even though Mordekaiser's not a tank, he's a Juggernaut. So I think Ornn has a little bit more finesse required, but he's still a really easy champion. Like my main tank top lane right now is Ornn, and I don't play him that often, but whenever I do, I feel like I have no trouble landing his abilities and stuff. Mr. Mantheon is gonna be here. He's probably he's a simple champion, I'll say. His old version would have been here. He's a simple champion, but I'm inclined to believe that very similar to like most other champions with like global ultimates and stuff, you want to put them there because you can get a lot done with a good global ultimate and good like map awareness and stuff and roaming. So I might put him here maybe, but you know what? Am I biased because I am a Pantheon main? He's not that hard. But at the same time, I can see why people would put him here. So you know what? I might just put him here. Poppy's actually hard. Poppy could be pretty tough to play. Her W and her E are very conditional abilities. Even her ultimate's really conditional. And her passive is not as straightforward as other passives like Camille, for example. Camille just walks up and auto attacks. Poppy, you could do some interesting things with their passive, and I think you can use that to kind of control or manipulate where your opponent's going to be walking towards. So I do think that Poppy's a more skill expressive tank for sure. Although, is she even a tank? I feel she does way too much damage to be called a tank. Pyke, Mr. Pyke. Pyke will be here. I've seen some pretty shitty Pykes in my day, and I've seen some Pykes with 1v9. So, but is he a full 2 tiers above other hook supports? No, not really actually. I don't think so, but he does fit the definition of high skill ceiling for sure. So I'll put him there. Kiana's tough. Kiana can be hard to play. She might even be here actually. A lot of things you have to be aware of, like knowing when to use what element, and then like how to position yourself relative to your opponent to get a good ultimate off and things like that. Credit where credit is due. She's quite taxing. I believe in the past I used to call her easy, which I take back now. She's one of the more difficult champions, or one of the more difficult assassins in the game for sure. Quinn is Quinn's kind of tough. She's a straightforward champion in terms of like how you attack her with. I don't think it's right to put her here or here. Neither of these two categories. She's the only good Quinn players out there are one tricks or co-mains at most, right? Like if you ever see Quinn, she's only ever piloted by a one trick. So, but she's not here obviously. I still think that yeah, she's a kind of a very similar to Akshan. You have to play her in a certain way. I don't think she's exactly like Akshan, but she's very reminiscent of that. Rakan's a little more tricky to play than a usual engaged support because he's not a tank. At the same time, he's not an enchanter, so I'll put him here for now. I think you pick him up once you get a couple games under your belt, then you kind of remember them forever, but he requires more thought than you would think. Rammus is free. We don't need to discuss why. The only mechanical expression is like, oh, remember not to press Q before or after you press your W. That's it. Rek'Sai is gonna be here. I think I would say ever since they changed her ultimate to be an attack instead of a global teleport, I put her here. She's pretty straightforward, you know, your unburrow, couple auto attacks, and then at max fury just E and that's it. She's a little bit more tricky to play because, you know, your tunnel manipulation and stuff like that, but overall I think she's alright. Rel is here. She looks complex being a quote-unquote transformation champion with like a horse mounted form and unmounted form, but no, Rel is pretty simple. I actually think her old version, the one where she still had the you pressed it and then between you and your tethered ally or whatever you would have a stun, I actually think that took a little bit more work than her current version, but her current version is fine, I think there. Renata's tough. Renata can be tough. There's a lot of fluctuation within her kit in terms of like what you get and what you can't get, how many people you can tag with it. I think Renata is probably the hardest enchanter to play. Who isn't? Where is she? No, actually, yeah, I definitely think Renata's the hardest enchanter to play. Renekton's here. He has he does have a higher skill ceiling than I would say like Darius and you know, obviously Nasus. But he's not quite here. Like once you pick him up, he's a super comfy champion to remember. And I can go 20 games without playing Renekton. I pick up my boy. I mean, I'm a Renekton main, so I guess I've logged in my hours on him, but he's so intuitive. He's such an intuitive champion. Okay, Rengar is gonna be here. I think Rengar is a challenging champion. He looks brain dead easy, but I feel like a good Rengar player has to be hyper aware of what they're doing, what they're using, and where they can use it, and if they can use it. Between Kha'Zix and Rengar, I think Rengar's a tougher champion, even though Kha'Zix is more open-ended. So I'll put Rengar in here. I think he's another one of those, like, the only good Rengar players out there are one-tricks, essentially. Riven. I'll give them credit. Riven's hard to play. Alright, there you go. I said it. I admitted Riven mains. I'm not downplaying you anymore. Well, no, that's a complete lie. I'm going to be downplaying you so much. But in this context, yes, Riven is the hardest of the 4 horsewomen to play. Rumble is going to be, I think, here. Heat management and similar to Quirky, where it's like sometimes you actually want to into the enemy team to get as much damage as you can, and I think the heat management alone is pretty important, and I think he's not as straightforward to play compared to like an AP bruiser like, let's say, you know, Mordekaiser. Definitely not Mordekaiser. He and Gragas both, they got some sauce. We have Ryze. Ryze is here. He would have been here if it was his old version, but here it's just like mostly EQ spam and stuff like that. But I think no, actually he's gonna be here. He's such a simple champion now. It's just EQ forever, and then EWQ if you want the speed burst, but that's about it. Samira is gonna be here, question mark. She's pretty mechanically demanding to play, but not like that much more to where I would say she's where's another marksman here, like Ezreal level or Draven level. I think I don't want to call her, she's not a face roll champion, definitely not a face roll champion, but when you pick a good engage point for her, then yeah, she definitely can be. Sejuani's gonna be, I'll say, yeah, I'll put her here. She's pretty easy. Senna's gonna be here, I think. She's very straightforward. She's a decently complex kit in terms of her scaling, but I think overall mechanically and even like decision making wise, she's there's a reason people play her when they're autofill support. They want to feel like they can contribute damage while at the same time supporting their team. Seraphine is gonna be, I'll say, also here, knowing what to double cast, but it really depends. If you're playing, you know, if you're playing mage Seraphine, like mid lane Seraphine, then it's usually double Q. If you're playing support Seraphine, it's usually double E or double W. In fact, most of the time I think it's double W, because even though, yes, triple E gives you a stun, you mostly just care about the root, and most Seraphines go Rylai's anyway, or at least mage Seraphines. So it's like basically double Q, double E, or double W and double E. Set is a little bit trickier than your other Juggernauts, I think. Position awareness and also knowing how to use your ultimate to line up for the most amount of damage. Shaco is, it really depends on what version you play, but Shaco can be quite difficult to play, I think. He's not like here, definitely not here, but believe me, I've seen some really lousy Shaco players, and then I've seen Pink Ward. Like, which champion, very similar to Nico, you need to have some kind of like mental illness. In a good way. I'm saying this in a very complimentary way. You need to have some kind of like, you know, psychopathic tendency if you want to play Shaco correctly. Like, you need to be a degen to play him correctly. Shen will be, I'll say here, he's very similar to Ornn, where he takes a little bit more understanding of, you know, his combo and rotation and his position relative to, let's say, a Malphite or Maokai. So I think he's there. And of course, you know, his ultimate, but his ultimate's a bit more simpler than I think Pantheon or other global ultimate champions, because for him it's just if he whichever person is engaging in the middle of the fight or whichever person's under attack. That's about it. Like the fact that it's a fixed location, which is his teammates, and not an open-ended location like Pantheon, gives him a bit more, I guess, linearity in that front. But he does definitely have a high skill ceiling. I just don't think he's up here with everyone else, if that makes sense. Shyvana's down here. Yeah, just pop her ultimate, torpedo, and then face roll over the keyboard. You could say it's a jungler macro-wise because you are pretty helpless pre-6 that you need to be careful, but that's about the same logic that I have for like Kale. I think Shyvana's pretty easy. Then you have Singed. Singed is here. Similar to Shaco and Nico, you need to play really unhinged to play Singed well, and he has such a deviant kit from most other champions that you need to have a very unique skill set to learn him, and I think that makes him quite interesting to play. Sion is, I'll say here, he's not as straightforward as the other tanks. That's for sure. He's a bit more skill expressive. Sivir's here. I think she's next to Ashe for being like one of the easier AD carries to play. Skarner, I'll put Skarner here, if not maybe here. I think you do need to know your angles of approach for Ixtal's impact and then like, you know, getting the most out of your new Impale. His neutral game is also kind of interesting in terms of like, do you want to hold on to the boulder as much as you can or use it as a projectile? But in totality, his passive Q and W are super easy to use, and then his E and ultimate can be more challenging. So I think Skarner might be over here. Smolder, I'll say here. He's tough. He's Kale who requires a little bit more, I think. Well, mechanically he's, you know, simple, just Q, put your W down to slow everybody, call for mom when you're being bullied, and then your E to like position yourself ever so slightly away from your opponents. Yeah, I definitely think Smolder's a little bit harder to play than your usual AD carries. Probably. Sona, I'm putting Sona here. This is a hot take. I know it's a really hot take, but I think people heavily underestimate the importance of using the right power chord. So even though people see it as like, oh, just mash Q, W, E, get all your auras up and stuff like that, the right power chord enhanced auto attack can make a lot of difference. That's why I want to put her here over like, let's say, Seraphine and the others. Although I guess Seraphine is the same thing where she has her own quote-unquote power chord enhancements, so maybe it might be kind of double standard for me to put Sona there. So I guess, you know what, we'll just put her here for now. Soraka. Here. She's the go-to autofill enchanter support. If you can't play her, then you suck. Swain's gonna be over here. He has some more nuance to him than usual, but once you get Rylai's, he becomes super brainless, and at that point he's just like kind of a stat checker battle mage. Silas can be tricky. His base kit is fairly simple, but at the same time not really. Well, obviously because he has an ultimate that can be theoretically any other ultimate, that alone gives him a high ceiling, but his base combo is actually pretty straightforward, so I'll put him here. But he is a pick up and play champion. He really much is a pick up and play champion. Not saying that Silas isn't mechanically expressive, like there's a difference between a good and bad Silas. There's a reason he's popular. He's pretty easy to pick up and he can do a lot with very little. Syndra's tough. Syndra can be pretty tough. I actually might put her here. She's not a strict puppeteer like Orianna and Desir, but I think Syndra, you know, people think, oh, just use EQ, use your E to stun everybody, use your W and then press ultimate. Like, yeah, of course. But Syndra is definitely more skill expressive than like Ryze, who just like, you know, point and click roots and stuff like that. Like you can do your ultimate first and then get a bunch of spheres on the ground and then a huge AoE scatter the weak and stuff like that. There's some things you can play around with, so I'll put her here for now. Tahm Kench, brainless. Talia, I'll say here. Once again, kind of tricky to get the hang of when you pick her up, but I think once you do pick her up, she's relatively simple to understand. It's mostly just like knowing how to make use of her seismic shove, whichever one that was. Is it her W or E? I'm assuming it's her W. That's like the most difficult thing about her, but it has the same mechanic as Victor's Death Ray, where it's like a paintbrush kind of stroking and casting effect. I think she'll be here. Talon will be here. He's between him and Kiana and Zed. He's the easiest to play mechanically and even macro mechanically too, I think. I'll put Talon here for now. Taric is going to be here. Taric takes a very unique set of tools, or he has a very unique set of tools, and to best utilize that requires a lot of awareness, because again, you can get Dazzle in a very interesting angle by using it on your opponent, or not on your opponent, on your ally, as well as yourself, to get like, you know, maybe triple stun instead of double stun, like, you know, to cover your options and stuff like that. Then, you know, knowing how to use his ultimate at the right time and stuff. I think that Taric is quite a tough support to learn, and it's not someone that you can kind of just get the most out of by playing only a couple of games. You need to learn him quite a bit. Teemo's actually going to be here. Hear me out. Let me explain why. Teemo's a very simple basic ability mechanic. Just poke, non-stop, blinding dart whenever you can. But Teemo is really risky to play. Like, if he gets engaged on, he melts to pieces. And then again, knowing how to put your mushrooms in a way that not only makes it so that your opponents can get hit by them, but also in a way that avoids getting oracle scanned. Because a lot of Teemos, a lot of bad Teemo players, they put mushrooms in very obvious locations to where people will, the enemy team, if they build oracles, they can just easily sweep and get rid of them. You ironically want to put them in places where you don't think they're going to check. Like, you think, oh, why would I put my mushroom here? No one's going to walk through here. But because the enemy knows that no one walks through there, they're not going to think to oracle that area, and then they're going to get blown up by a mushroom. If you put them right in a brush or in a point of entry in the jungle, of course they're going to sweep it with oracles, because that's where most Teemos put it. So I think Teemo actually is tougher to play at a high level than he initially appears to be, because you need to play counterintuitively to what most people are thinking. Thresh is up here. Definitely the most skill expressive of the tank supports to play. Tristana's gonna be here. She needs a bit more work. She's very similar to Caitlyn and the other champions, where you can't exactly like mentally AFK and play her correctly, but I think she's not quite up here either. Trundle, free. Tryndamere, free. Twist of Fate, here. No, I'm gonna say it. Pantheon's harder to play than Twist of Fate. Twitch is here. He's positional awareness is important for him, because sometimes you want to put yourself very close to the enemy team to get the most amount of damage done and the most amount of stacks. So I think Twitch has that kind of Evelyn factor to him. Not as much as Evelyn, of course, but I think yeah, he's probably a little bit harder than these guys. Urgot, he takes work. Actually, I'm gonna put him here. Urgot is tricky to play. He's not just positional awareness and not just like knowing, like, just throwing your ultimate at the lowest health target. I think because of the way Urgot attacks and because of how opponents can also play around it, you need to be really on point with surprising your opponent, so to speak. He takes a decent amount of patience too, because for a lot of people, when they're under attack, their first immediate thought is to automatically disdain and, throw them behind him and stuff like that. But sometimes you don't want to, because it all depends on where your shotgun legs are. A lot of micromanaging to go with this guy. Udyr is here. Old Udyr would have been here, new Udyr is here. I think the awakened version of each of his forms can play a big role in how you play him correctly. So it's like Karma with Mantra, basically. Vars, depending on which one you're playing, I still am going to put him here. Neither version of Vars is as easy as it looks. Like the artillery lethality fire Vars is not as simple to play, nor is the on-hit AP Vars, so I'll put him here. Vayne's a battle marksman, so she goes here, right next to Lucian and Samira and Neela and Kai'Sa. Alright, let's finish this up. Veigar, should I just put him here purely because of Event Horizon? I think I will. Event Horizon's an interesting ability. It doesn't stun unless you touch the border. So sometimes you want to put it directly on your opponent, or other times you want to trap them in the middle. Like you don't want to put them in stun, you want to stun them off with it. So that, let's say, anyone with an AoE ability like Way or whatever can dump their stuff right in the cage. So like other times you want to use the cage to try to get that stun right away, or you want to do the opposite thing, where it's to just put them directly in the middle so that they can just sit and get cooked by whatever your teammates are going to be doing. Vel'Koz requires geometry, woo, skill expression, yay. Vex, I'll put Vex here as well. I think Vex is can be pretty tough to play, or not, I don't want to say tough to play. She needs more work than Annie, I think. She's not as, you can't just like sit on, or no, you can. Rather, but I think she's a bit more nuanced than Annie. Yeah, there we go. Vi's simple. There's not much mechanics to her at all. Viego can be tough because you need to know every single champion in the game. You freaking absorb Shaco and you have no idea how to use them, or you absorb Bel'Veth, you have no idea how to use her. You absorb, let's say Akshan, and you don't know how to use Hookshot or the heroic swing that well. Like Viego alone takes a lot of effort. You know what? I might actually put him here. If not, I might put him here. Because if you need to know every single champion and how to use them most efficiently, then yes, Viego is the most difficult champion in the game. So I might actually just put him here, right? Like, unlike Sylas, where it's just an ultimate, Viego, you need to know every single champion. Victor's gonna be here. I'm inclined to put him here. I personally want to put him here. I think he's kind of like, I guess, yeah, more like Rumble Rise, like that kind of battle mage type where he might be a bit more challenging to play. But I also don't think it's fair to put Victor here when Talia is down here, so I might put Victor just here for now. Vladimir, free. He is so free. My god, this guy's easy. Volibear is also kind of free. I know this is kind of a hot take. I play Volibear quite a bit. He looks like he could require a bit more nuance to play, but let's be real, not really. He's actually like, you have a guaranteed way to land the E. Just press E, then wait like a quarter second and then stun your opponent. Wow, so much skill expression. I love this guy. Volibear is one of my favorite champions to play right now in this current meta. Especially like the Korean Volibear, the Rod of Ages, and then the Quick Blades, and then like that stuff. But yeah, he's easy to play. He's really easy to play. Weedwick. I'm gonna put him here. Warwick he takes a bit more work to play with than you think. You need to really know how to manipulate W and then the Q, whether you want to just like bite onto them to just like do damage, or if you want to latch onto them to follow them wherever they're gonna go. Using Primal Howl correctly as well can also matter, because sometimes you use Primal Howl for the engage disruption or just to like protect yourself. Other times you want to use it to fear everyone on the team, and then the way it interacts with Infinite Duress, like there's a lot of moving parts to Warwick's kit. Or I guess like mechanically he's not that difficult, but like decision making wise there's some fluctuation to him and how you want to play him. So I think I'll put him here. Wukong is going to be here as well. He has you know, you can play around with this clone a bit and stuff like that, but realistically, again, I play Wukong a lot. You mostly just want to make sure that you tag your opponent with your Q first to shred their armor before you use the ultimate, because if you use ultimate before Q, you actually miss out on quite a bit of damage. Zaya's gonna be here. Battle Marksman, she can be quite tricky to play. In fact, actually she might be a bit harder to play than the other Battle Marksman, because you have to keep track of her feathers, so I might put her here. Xerath, a very skill shot oriented dude, and therefore I will put him here. He's not like Ezreal. I don't think I want to put him at Ezreal level, because sometimes Xerath can just stay so far away from the enemy team he's not at risk of getting killed. So I might put him here, but he's a super skill shot oriented champion. So I think, yeah. Like Vel'Koz, should I just put Vel'Koz up here too? No, not really, because Vel'Koz's skill shots are definitely, I think, easier to... No, that's not true. That is not true. Okay, I'm stuck. Because Ezreal, I put him here because he's all skill shot. And I'm putting Xerath and Vel'Koz here because they're also skill shot, but I guess it does come down to maintenance, right? Like, whenever I pick up Xerath, I feel like I have no trouble remembering the feel of how to use his abilities, so I might just put him there. Xin Zhao, free. No, I take it back. Xin Zhao has some nuance. He has some nuance to him. A little bit more than what it looks, so I'll actually put him here. But he is very close. He's at like the tipping point. Like if there was like a half tier right here, I'd put him there. But I might put him there for now. Yasuo does take work. Contrary to popular belief, he's actually difficult to play. So I'll put him there. And yes, I will concede Yone is also a little bit harder to play than people think he is. He's not brainless, but he's not Yasuo levels of hard. I think Yone is more easy to play. No, I'll put him there. So some people, and I did kind of like say this myself in the past, where like you can only use Soul Unbound offensively, you can't use it defensively. No. Some Yonas, they will intentionally Soul Unbound and then run away, run towards a place where they can get 2 Qs, and as soon as they teleport back, then they use their Q to dash away, right? Like, so you could play around with that a bit, but overall I think Yone he's the definition of you can miss everything and still one-shot your opponent, so I'm putting him there. Yorick is hard to play, not mechanically, but constructor-wise, like summoner-wise, like, you know, he's such a delicate champion in the early game, very much like Gangplank. He's a delicate champion that can get punished really easily. And you just need to know how to play him because he has such a unique feel to him. So I'll put him up there. Zac is pretty free, I think. If he had his old ultimate where he can like drag opponents with him, then I might put him here, but he's pretty free. The only thing you really have to work on is land your Q and then auto attack to get, you know, that's about it. Everything else is self-explanatory. Zed is gonna be here. Zed takes work. Takes a lot of work, a lot of mechanics, a lot of awareness, so I might actually put him here. Do I want to say he's harder than Qiyana, or is Qiyana harder than Zed? No, they're about equal. Zeri is Battle Marksman, takes work. She's not like super difficult to play, but she's no pushover either. You need to practice her quite a bit. Ziggs is next to Xerath and Vel'Koz, artillery mage. Because of skill shots, they have to be up here at minimum. And I think Ziggs is you know, he's got his own quirks and stuff. Zillion's gonna be here. His abilities can be simple, right, in terms of one of them just speeds up or slows down an opponent, the other one just resets cooldowns and stuff, but time bomb placement can require a bit of thought to it, so I'll put him there. Zoe can be tricky. She is an artillery mage, yes, but she's also a burst mage, and sometimes you do want to get really close to your opponent for the spell thieves and stuff like that, so I'll put Zoe there. Last but not least, we have Zyra. Zyra is gonna be here. It sounds very contradictory because I put Heimerdinger all the way up here and Zyra there. But I think Zyra is a pretty straightforward burst combo tool where it's just, you know, root, put some plants down with rampant growth, then press Q, and then ultimate to, you know, set up your knockup and stuff like that. So I think, I don't think Zyra is that challenging to play. I might put her here just to be charitable. In fact, I think I will. But yeah, this wraps up my tier list. If I can I do this? This is my tier list in terms of champion difficulty. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with them. You most definitely will. I think I have some pretty spicy takes for this one. I can imagine a lot of people will disagree with me on this. Either way, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments down below. And apart from that, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other tier list videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.